The outlaws of the Arkansas border used to say that if you saw a tall man on a white stallion emerging from the dust of the horizon, you had two choices. You could pray for a quick death, or you could prepare for the iron. He didn't look like a typical deputy. He wore a wide-brimmed black hat, a suit that stayed remarkably clean despite the trail grit, and a twin set of .45 caliber Colt peacemakers worn butt forward for a lightning-fast road agent spin. But the most striking thing about him wasn't his guns, it was the silver star on his chest, and the fact that his skin was as dark as the shadows he hunted in. This was Bass Reeves, a man who had escaped the chains of slavery to become the greatest U.S. Marshal the Wild West had ever known, arresting over 3,000 felons without ever sustaining a single serious wound. Born into the storm. Bass Reeves was born in Crawford County, Arkansas, a piece of property owned by a man named William Steele Reeves. In the antebellum South, Bass was viewed not as a human being with a destiny, but as an asset. When William Reeves' son, George, went off to fight for the Confederacy in the Civil War, he took Bass with him as a body servant. It was during the chaos of the war that the first spark of the legend was lit. Legend suggests that during a late-night card game, a dispute erupted between Bass and George Reeves. Bass, possessing a physical strength that was already becoming local lore, struck his master and laid him flat. Knowing that a black man hitting a white man in the South was a death sentence, Bass didn't wait for the morning light. He fled into the darkness, riding hard toward the one place where the laws of the white man held no sway, the Indian Territory, modern-day Oklahoma. The School of the Wilderness. For years, Bass lived among the Cherokee, Creek, and Seminole nations. He wasn't just hiding, he was evolving. He learned to track a broken blade of grass across a mile of flint rock. He became fluent in several indigenous languages. Most importantly, he mastered the long gun and the pistol. While he claimed he was only fair with a rifle, others whispered that he could hit a silver dollar thrown into the air from 100 yards away. When the Emancipation Proclamation was signed and the war ended, Bass emerged from the territory a free man. He settled in Van Buren, Arkansas, bought land, married a woman named Nellie Jenny, and began raising a family. He was a successful farmer and a devoted father, but the wilderness was calling him back in a way he never expected. The hell on the border. In 1875, the hanging judge Isaac Parker was appointed to the federal court for the Western District of Arkansas. His jurisdiction was a nightmare, 74,000 square miles of lawless Indian territory, a dumping ground for the most violent murderers, rapists, and horse thieves in the United States. Parker needed men who were tough, uncorruptible, and crucially, men who knew the territory. Parker's U.S. Marshal, James Fagan, had heard of the tall black farmer who spoke the languages of the tribes and knew every hidden canyon in the territory. He recruited Bass Reeves as a deputy U.S. Marshal. Bass was one of the first black men to be given a badge and a gun west of the Mississippi. To the outlaws, it was a joke. To Bass, it was a holy mission. The master of disguise. Bass Reeves didn't just hunt outlaws with lead, he hunted them with his mind. At 6'2" and 200 pounds, he was an imposing figure, but he was also a master of psychological warfare. Because he was illiterate, having been denied an education in slavery, he would have someone read his warrants to him until he had memorized every name, charge, and detail. He never once served the wrong warrant to the wrong man. He often traveled in disguise. One famous account tells of Bass dressing as a ragged tramp, hiding his handcuffs and pistols under a tattered coat. He walked 20 miles to the cabin of two notorious brothers he was hunting. He showed up at their door, feigning exhaustion, and claiming he was being chased by a posse. The brothers, feeling a kinship with a fellow outlaw, invited him in for dinner. That night, while they slept, Bass handcuffed them both to their bed frames. When they woke up, they found the tramp standing over them with a badge in one hand and a Colt in the other. "Time to go see the judge, boys," he said with a grim smile.
Over 32 years of service, the stories of Bass's narrow escapes became the stuff of campfire myths. Once, while chasing a trio of outlaws, they ambushed him and ordered him to get off his horse. As they held him at gunpoint, Bass calmly reached into his pocket and pulled out his warrants. "Which one of you's Mr. Webb?" Bass asked calmly. The outlaws laughed, distracted by his composure. In that split second of levity, Bass drew. He shot two of the men before they could pull their triggers and disarmed the third. On another occasion, a bullet clipped the button off his coat. Another took the hat off his head, yet he was never hit. The outlaws began to believe he was protected by a supernatural power. They called him the Indomitable Marshal. The most harrowing chapter of Bass's life didn't involve a stranger, but his own blood. In 1902, a warrant was issued for a murderer in Muskogee. The suspect was Benjamin "Benny" Reeves, Bass's own son, who had killed his wife in a fit of jealous rage. The other marshals in the office were silent. They didn't want to give the warrant to Bass, and they didn't want to arrest the son of their hero. Bass sat at his desk for a long time, the weight of the silver star pressing into his chest. Finally, he stood up, took the warrant, and said, Give it to me. He's my responsibility. He tracked his own son for 2 weeks. He brought him in, shackled and silent, and handed him over to the court. Benny was sentenced to life in Leavenworth. It was a testament to Bass's unwavering belief that the law was blind, and no man, not even his own flesh and blood, was above it. When Oklahoma achieved statehood in 1907, the federal Marshal system changed, and the newly implemented Jim Crow laws meant that a black man could no longer serve as a federal marshal in the same capacity. Bass joined the Muskogee Police Department, where he served with distinction until his death in 1910. For decades, his story was buried by a history that preferred its heroes white. Many historians now believe that Bass Reeves was the primary inspiration for the Lone Ranger. Like the fictional character, Bass rode a white or light gray horse, gave out silver coins as a signature to some he helped, utilized a Native American companion, many of his posse riders were from the tribes, and operated with a strict moral code that favored capture over killing whenever possible. The legacy of the Star. Bass Reeves didn't just survive the Old West, he tamed it. He was a man who lived through the transition from the whip of the plantation to the gavel of the federal court. He proved that justice wasn't a matter of color, but of character. Today, as you stand in the windswept plains of Oklahoma or look upon the courthouse in Fort Smith, you can almost hear the thud of hooves and the jingle of spurs. The story of Bass Reeves is the story of America itself, brutal, complicated, and ultimately defined by those rare individuals who have the courage to stand in the gap between chaos and the law. He remains the ultimate American enigma, a man who was once owned by the law, who grew up to become its most legendary defender.